Hey guys, I want to welcome you to our back to school webinar. Today we're going to discuss 10 tips for a successful school year. All right, being a martial arts instructor, I've had the privilege of teaching probably thousands of students over the past 11, 12 years, being in business for ourselves. And, I've noticed a bunch of different things that, parents have to go through during the summer months as well as during the school months in order to keep their kids focused, keep them on task, and keep them motivated and things of that nature. So what I did was I compiled some strategies that some of the parents have thrown my way, and also what I've noticed as a martial arts instructor. So I'm going to go through some of those tips now. First thing that we're going to talk about is setting bedtime routines. The first day of school, we know, is no time for you to make, dramatic adjustments, around the household sleep schedules. So instead, what we encourage you guys to do is to ease children back into a school year routine gradually. All right. During the last 2 weeks of summer, we want you to reintroduce a school year bedtime. All right. So as an example, if, they're supposed to get up at 6 a.m., for school to get ready, we recommend you, start getting them into the habit of doing that, making sure that they get into good habits. So that way, by the time school rolls back around, it's not such a chore. All right. Start, scrolling back those late hours that they're staying awake, and start getting them back into a normal school bedtime routine. Okay. Make sure that you begin waking them up earlier and earlier. I wouldn't recommend that you do it all all of a sudden, because that'll be shock for them. So I would recommend that, over the last 2 weeks of the summer before school starts, you begin to gradually increase the times that you wake them up, as far as waking them up. Maybe if they're used to waking up at 9 a.m., start off getting them up at 8 o'clock, then at 7 o'clock, and then at 6 o'clock to start, getting their bodies accustomed to it. All right. The closer to school time hours that you're able to get it, the better. Okay. Second rule is going to be get your meal schedule in place. Now, when we talk about our meal schedule, summer meals as well as school meals, the schedules tend to be different. In the summertime, there's a lot more flexibility as far as when kids eat. There's more time for them to just grab a quick snack and things of that nature. And we all know that when school starts, that extra free time that they might normally have isn't always there. So we always recommend that you get kids back into a school meal schedule. All right. So don't neglect meal times. All right. Especially for younger children, they need to adapt to new meal routines before the school day demands it. So let's just say, as an example, if during school months, if they're supposed to be, if they're accustomed to eating breakfast in the morning, let's make sure that, we get them up early enough and a lot, time for that to be able to, get them breakfast. And studies show that, kids who eat breakfast tend to be more focused throughout the day rather than, waiting until lunchtime to have to, eat their first main meal of the day. Meanwhile, they've been unfocused because their stomach is growling, or they can't wait, and they're thinking about what they're going to eat for lunch or where they're going to eat for lunch, and so on and so forth. All right. So planning meals and snacks, to accustom, the little ones to a ritual of the school day before the school year begins is going to be critical, for them to start getting their bodies accustomed to eating and digesting on a proper schedule. All right. Third thing that we recommend is create a calendar. All right. And a calendar central. So, we're doing stuff in terms of making sure that we don't create any chaos. So with, the recommendation that we're doing for creating a calendar, we always recommend that you guys get either a paper calendar or a paper schedule where it's something that the entire family can see and track. All right. So nothing calms the school year chaos like, a calendar central. All right. And we call it calendar central because it's someplace that everybody in the family can see what needs to be done, what's scheduled, what's on the calendar, so on and so forth. All right, so a centralized site for family calendars and schedules, is an absolute necessity. One of the places that we recommend that is either putting it by the phone where everybody in the family can see it, or use a magnet that you can secure it on a refrigerator. I know for us, we went to Staples and we just bought like a huge desktop calendar. And with the desktop calendar, we can see at a quick glance what needs to happen on that day. Make sure that you use, different color codes for different family members, so that way, you can see very quickly who's obligated to what, and that way you as the parent can manage your time appropriately. And if you need to, add other calendars to the schedule. You might have one calendar for, activities, after school activities. You might have another calendar for, planning the lunch menus and meals. You might have another calendar for, class assignments and projects that might be due, sports practices and things of that nature. Okay. Also, what I've gotten from some of the other parents, when a parent coordinator asks for volunteers, like parents to come along on some of the field trips, you'll know very quickly whether your schedule is free on that particular day and whether you can join that trip or not. All right. Tip 4, is going to be plan before you shop. Now, we know probably one of the more stressful times in the very beginning of a school year is, having to go school shopping and deal with the crowds and, how much money you're spending, things of that nature. So it can be a very, very stressful time. And, I don't know whether a lot of you know it or not, but July is actually the biggest sales month for back to school, and August is the second biggest sales month for retailers when it comes to clothing and back to school needs. So I'm trying to get this out to you guys as early as possible, and hopefully you guys will still be able to take advantage of some of those back to school sales and not wait until the last minute when everything is already sold out or the sales are gone. We always recommend taking an afternoon and assess each child in your family's clothing needs. So empty the drawers, empty the closets of any outgrown or outworn clothing, and you can either donate those to, different organizations, like the Goodwill or the Red Cross or, any of those other, organizations. And, most neighborhoods now, you can go to the gas station and find these depository metal boxes where you can take your bags of clothes if you wanted to donate, or if you actually wanted to get a receipt. I would definitely recommend that you take those clothes to a retail Goodwill center or something like that, where you can get a receipt and write it off on your taxes. One of the things that I didn't mention in this slide, there are some stores that are in like Manhattan where you can actually do an exchange for gently used clothing, and what they'll do is they'll give you credit for the clothes that you're bringing in. In return, you might be able to find some some nice stuff, stuff that'll be different, but that would fit the kids. And I know some people have a stigma towards, shopping at a thrift store and things of that nature, but you'd be surprised how much money you can save if you just took the time to, look through some of these thrift stores and just look to see what they have available. Some of them may not necessarily have kid sizes, but, it doesn't hurt to take a look, and, it's all about save, and, becoming more organized. Okay. Also, work with your child, to make sure that you clean and organize their clothing storage, before you start adding new garments to their wardrobe. It'll definitely cut down on those, morning calls of, Mom, I don't have anything clean to wear, or I don't have any clean socks or any clean underwear. So develop a wardrobe, needs list for each child in the family, and also, like I said before, check the hand-me-downs from older siblings as you make your list. If you discuss the needs list and the family budget with the children, before you shop. You'll definitely avoid any in-store temper tantrums, depending on the age of the child. I know a lot of parents who don't even like to take their kids shopping because they want to avoid those attitudes and temper tantrums by any means necessary. Okay. And also, don't forget to call the school and ask them for, what school supplies or classroom supplies might be needed for their classes. And that way, you can make sure that you're not spending any unnecessary money on stuff that they may not necessarily need. Forewarned is forearmed, and definitely helps protect the family budget. Number 5, I've heard horror stories. Parents wait till the last minute and they don't realize, they can't even get their children into school sometimes because they don't have any idea of where, different papers or documentations might be that they, might need in order to get the children enrolled into new schools and things of that nature. So I would highly recommend that you gather your papers. School entry may require documentation from immunization records to old, last year's report cards from previous years. Athletes might need, proof of medical examinations if they're going to get on school teams. I always say a little preparation can prevent frantic last-minute searches for a birth certificate or registration confirmation. All right? Call your child's school or check the school district website beforehand to find out what paperwork would be required, and then get to it. Make sure you go find it. All right? You won't be sorry come registration day. Number 6, take aim on morning madness. I know a lot of you parents can relate to this. Okay? Each morning, it's important that you think ahead to the following morning. Where can you, lighten the load? How can you improve your functionality in the mornings? How can you be more effective and get them out the door quicker? Little things, little time saver tips. Set the breakfast table as you clear the dishes, the dinner dishes, and make sure that breakfast foods are easy to reach. Okay. Lay out children's clothing the night before. Scan their backpacks or lunch, boxes, and check all of those little compartments that kids love to hide stuff in, for missing homeworks or projects or library books, to make sure that they're not falling behind or, not missing an assignment, or they don't have assignment due tomorrow, things of that nature. I've heard a lot of stories about that. All right. Make sure musical instruments or sports bags are packed and ready to go. Do your bathroom wars breakout, and break out the daily, like break them out of that small fry bathroom wars, especially if you have multiple children in the household. You may need to schedule bathroom time so that way everybody gets an equal time, for them to, get their time in the mirror. Okay. The question that I ask is, what do you do about books and papers and lunch money and permission slips and, anything else that, might affect your family? Okay. Practice the launch pad concept. By creating a dedicated space for every family member, a launch pad gets the family out the door in record time and super organized. Number 7, this I know some people think it might be silly, but we always say that perfect practice makes perfect in martial arts. So I'm going to definitely recommend that you make a practice run of it. Ask yourself, a couple of questions. How will your children get to school? The first day of school is definitely not the time to find out that it takes, 10 minutes and not 5 minutes to get to the nearest bus stop. Before school begins, make a practice run, get the children to school on time. If they walk, help them learn the routes. They'll take, help them to take notes and things of that nature. Any sort of safety concerns that you may have, make sure that you review those policies with them at that time. Are they carpooling? Make sure that the dry run accounts for the early morning traffic that you might encounter if you got to use the highways, or what your alternative routes might be if case there is traffic on the highways. And bus riders, make sure that the schedule. When is the bus scheduled to get to that stop? Make sure that the different bus schedules, and what your backup plan would be in case you missed the bus. So that way, you still have a good amount of time to still be able to make it to school in time. Number 8, this one I think is huge. I think a lot of times we expect the kids to kind of know, what's expected of them. And then we, find out very quickly, exactly what their expectations are once school time begins, and you start to see how long it takes them to do their homework. If we help them to start setting goals where like, let's just say as an example, within based on last year's experience and how long or how on task they were with previous years, you pretty much know your child. So whether they're a focused student or whether they're an unfocused student, or whether they need some extra help or guidance and things of that nature. So I would definitely recommend that you sit down with them and re-examine their school performance, both academically and in any extracurricular activities that they might have had. And remember to set doable goals. Try not to overstress them. You start putting these crazy demands on them, that you want them to get their homework done, in a half hour or in 45 minutes, when, realistically that may not be doable. So we want to make sure that, we set reasonable expectations, and we can then start, trying to improve those goals and maybe start reducing the time a little bit as we help them to get more efficient and more effective at completing their tasks. Sorry, one more thing. Be sure to set the time expectations for homework. When I said time expectations, like, I'm talking about, like, let's just say as an example, if you expect your child to, start homework at 4 o'clock, because they get home at 3:30, lay out a routine for them, from 3:30, from the time that they get home till 4 o'clock, you expect them to eat a snack. From 4 to 6, you expect them to complete, all the homework assignments. From 6 to 7 o'clock, or 7:30, maybe you guys are out at an extracurricular activity, or, maybe that's family time or dinner or whatever the case may be. So lay all of those expectations out. 9th, get emotionally ready. A new school, especially, can mean a lot of stress for a child as well as parents. So if they're attending a new school, following some of these other steps should help to reduce some of the stress and anxiety that you guys are going through. We always say that the 5 P's of success are proper preparation prevents a poor performance. So take some time before school starts and relax and enjoy an activity together. Talk to each other about the school year coming up and reaffirm with your child that you are there to help whenever help is needed. Be sure to tell him or her that, make sure that you tell them this, and don't assume that they already know it. All right. Kids like to hear it. We all like to hear that we're loved and we're cared for, and that, that there is help there if we need it. Okay. It's easier to handle the stress from outside sources like school when you know that there's somebody on your side. Okay. And lastly, choose your after-school activities wisely. All right. Not all programs are created equal. So be sure to choose activities that will reinforce the life skills and habits that you're teaching them at home. We know that as a parent, you're looking for your child to be more focused and more disciplined, and help them to, be more independent and more confident and more self-reliant, And we all know that as adults, these are some important characteristics that children need in order to navigate through life. So martial arts, we all know, provides discipline and focus and things of that nature. And above and beyond that, it's a great activity, to be able to really reinforce some of the family values that you instill in them at home. Our programs at America's Ultimate Martial Arts Academy definitely provide those types of benefits. Okay, so like for us, we always say that martial arts isn't just a sport, it's a way of life. So, our martial arts goes above and beyond just punching and kicking. We're very big on life skills. And when it comes to life skills, we like to help children to set and achieve goals. So everything that, I've found in my life, growing up as a child, then into a teenager and then young adulthood, and now, being an older adult, I can relate any aspect of life to my experiences in martial arts. And, that's when you start to realize, how the benefits of martial arts can help you all throughout your life, not just as a child, not just as an adult, but I mean, from beginning to end, not just physical benefits, but the huge mental benefits. I remember, when I was coming up as an underbelt, before I got my black belt, and my instructor would have us sitting down talking at least 2 and 3 hours after classes were already over. So we would have trained for like an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours, and then we'd sit down for another 2 hours just talking and discussing, life and how, how we can improve and how we can, different challenges that, we faced, as young men, and some of the young ladies that we had in the program at the time. And he really made it, a little bit clearer on how to navigate through some of those challenges. So, at our academy, we definitely do that. And I'm constantly talking to my teens and, and my young men and young ladies, to try and help them to understand, that life is full of challenges. I mean, that's really the definition of life. Life is the challenge. So, we always say that, in life is like a game, but you only get one chance to play it. So, we play to win. If you'd like any more information about our programs or, how you can register your child for our back to school sessions, you can check us out on the web at americasultimatema.com or give us a call at 347-673-6611. All right. Look forward to seeing you guys at the next webinar. All right. And let's have a great, safe, successful school year.